recommendations, got it, to date, that we have agreed upon. So that includes a number that we have struck. So what I'd like to do is just, I'll scroll through the primary changes and just sort of share where the changes were, and then we'll actually come back to the refined ones for any remaining issues. So I'm gonna do the annoying scrolling. So let me just give a recap on the changes and then we'll go back. On the land use and water integration, Waverly had made a suggestion that people then built off of. So we ended up with just some wordsmithing, no real change in intent, but more clarification and taking out some of the redundancies. We spent a pretty significant amount of time discussing sort of the similarities, redundancies, and the emphasis around the economic drivers. And kind of where we ended was the incentives were the economic levers, were incentives that we feel are already tools that most people are using. And what we're trying to do is focus on sort of the bigger opportunities. And there were a recommendation to move the idea of tax breaks, which is a newer idea, and move that back into the document and make sure that it's under sort of what used to be called big ideas, but is captured in there under additional discussion areas. So we struck that one, but kept and then rephrased the use price signals and added, just sort of rearranged and added some words. So that one is wordsmith. Under build capacity, as it was written, we felt that it was redundant, but identified based on some sort of comments from Frank that we hadn't really kind of brought forward the target audience of commercial users. So, and that we needed to bring business along as well. So we added, even though we said we would not edit the comments or the recommendations from the prior meeting, what we decided to do was just add that to partnerships that we need to also include and reach out to the business community as partners. So there's the addition of them to that partnerships recommendation. Address equity, there was not a lot of disagreement. It was mainly cleaning up the language. So that one was wordsmithed to the current recommendation. And then finally, under the advanced partnerships and drought dialogue, over the weekend, Tori and Amy worked on the edits in purple, which we then wordsmithed a little bit to try to kind of create some more clarity around. So that one, the intent didn't change a lot, but we just sort of rearranged the words and changed the title. So those were the primary changes, some substantive in terms of striking or emphasis, and the rest just sort of language. So it'd probably be easier and cleaner if we just find in this kind of going through these on where they change. So starting with the one that's currently highlighted in purple, that was one of the changes where we added business to advance landscape transformation solutions, and we added build capacity of those two sectors.
Totally consistent with the conversation we had on Thursday about the broader other people involved.
Yeah. Kind of making a nod to who we're trying to leverage. So I guess I'll just sort of pause and maybe give you a chance to read those if you have not, and then we can address any remaining thoughts you might have and just go in order of the ones you want to discuss.
There are a couple comment bubbles that are in the PDF that Jenna sent out before the meeting we had on Thursday that had to do, for instance, like on the name of advanced turf bands, right? Where Tim was like, oh, maybe we should call this non-functional turf bands. But then we had the conversation on Thursday. So I'm a little bit unclear about, is Tim's comment before we had the conversation on Thursday or after? And it is something we're like considering to change the name on now. I just don't, I don't know the timing of that comment.
That's a good question. The way that I'm interpreting and processing is because those comments on the recommendations are all done prior to the conversations.
Okay.
These are more of the final recommendations, but if there's any that anyone's dying to add, I mean, that's why we're here. So if there's anything.
I think the way we addressed that, if I can recall from Thursday, was we took out in the title non-functional turf or ban, because we're actually talking about two levels of policy, state and local, and they're a ban at the state level and limits and other stuff build upon that at the local level.
It's funny, like we're probably not going to change the title of it now, but it's a pretty soft way to say what context of the bullet says. Like, we're like advanced turf policy. Oh, but really what we're talking about is a ban and limits. Like, it feels a little two-faced to me.
To make the timing of that comment more confusing, Drew, I actually wrote that comment during the meeting, not before.
There you go, Tim. Thanks.
Not an open. I have one thing here that once you read it, I can't get out of my mind, which is tax breaks, and where that came from. I don't remember that conversation, and I would, if anybody can elaborate on the context, and maybe this isn't the meeting for it, and I should have caught it sooner. But I'm really struggling with tax breaks for water efficiency or tax breaks for using less water.
Yeah, I remember it came up in the context of like we do have federal tax breaks for energy efficiency related things like windows, insulation, solar, etc. And I think there's been a couple efforts, maybe led by Alliance for Water Efficiency here and there, to extend a similar kind of tax break for water efficiency improvements, be it, irrigation equipment or landscape transformation that could be done at the federal level or the state level.
Gotcha.
That's
Yeah,
kind of what I remember.
I worked so much in new development, my brain instantly went to tax breaks for new development to have water-wise landscape, and I'm like, no, please, that's not.
No, I remember it was in the context of retrofitting existing.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks, Drew.
Well,
and that because they use economic levers, recommendation was taken out. That any reference in these recommendations, the new ones to tax breaks, has been eliminated. Regardless, so there is still that section in the report and the other ideas or whatever that's called now, referencing that conversation that Drew just mentioned. But I believe that it's talking about retrofits, but I can go back and just check to make sure that that's clear.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, Tim, I remember any conversation about new development was more like charge the appropriate amount for the water use that it's using. So if it uses less water, charge less. No tax break related stuff.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, in general, I like that there's less of them than there were before. We used to have 13 or 14, and now we have like 10-ish.
Yeah.
That's good, I think. I don't have any substantive like.
I'm still ruminating on what you brought up, Drew, in terms of the name of the first recommendation. Trying to think about if there's a way to strengthen it and yet not say the whole thing that we say in like the more detailed description in just the title of it. So that's why I'm quiet. I'm like trying to, think through that.
Like advance is weak, adopt is clear. I don't think anyone would argue with that.
Stronger.
I mean, really what we're talking about is non-functional turf limits. So like I would say limit non-functional turf.
To stand up for all of the ideas that were presented in that, the first half of that sentence clause is. The second half is not. The second half was getting at additional limitations that would limit turf further, such as residential yards and locations that would not be defined as non-functional, but
That's
limiting
right.
the amount.
I remember that. It was more than just non-functional turf.
Right.
Yep.
But it was adopt the policies, like regulate without saying regulate.
Yeah, I would support moving towards adopt versus advance.
Yes.
I'm impartial on this one, so either way works for me.
I understand. I mean,
Greg?
turf policy doesn't really. What's turf policy? I don't know. Like,
Adopt stronger turf policy.
I mean, turf policy is like, let's make sure there's soccer fields for kids to play on. Let's make sure there's like recreational areas. That's turf policy as well.
Adopt limits on turf.
Adopt turf limits.
Turf limits.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think policy, though, to your point, Drew, I don't disagree that that is turf policy, but I think how it's explained after the title, if you will,
Yeah.
was good at saying what we're trying to get there, maybe
Yeah.
more the title.
And perhaps it's implicit in like the name of our task force and our charge and all of the other things that we're talking about. I'm a pretty strong believer in like being transparent about what you're saying. And this seems to me like it's trying to hide something to please people that may not otherwise be okay with it.
Feel that support legislation prohibiting installation of non-functional water intensive turf is weak?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I just think like the summary of it. Someone were to just read down the list, just read the bulls. Adopt turf policy is pretty But I'm not gonna like thumbs down or raise a stink about this.
Okay.
I mean, it's basically adopt policies, reducing or adopt policies limiting and prohibiting turf. But that's a mouthful.
I just want to flag too, this was one of the ones that was discussed and agreed upon on Thursday. So I'm a little nervous about now changing it without.
100%.
All right. Well, let's just leave adopt and then move on. Okay. So for today, scrolling down, I think we're okay with the partners with industry. Let's kind of shift to the use price signals.
This is just a question. I haven't thought through it much, but should water dedication policy be singular or plural? Is it policies or just water dedication policy as a type? Yeah. All right. I think that's fine. And water budgets.
It is Waverly. It's weird in that it's the only singular of all of the rest of the commas that are all plural. So purely for that reason, I think I would change it so it reads better.
Yeah, I'm okay either way.
Makes sense.
That's something that a copy edit would fix.
Everyone okay? Anything else?
Yeah. We had a conversation with Peter about that water budgets aren't necessarily, they don't have to have price signals in order to be effective. So I don't know if water budgets are, this is the only place they can be, but it's.
Yeah, we struggled with finding an appropriate heading for it.
Yeah.
I mean, we spent a lot of time figuring out the intent. And so we landed feeling really comfortable on the tools and the intent. And we're like, meh on the heading. But didn't feel like we were going to throw ourselves on the sword for it. You guys can, Kat and Jenna, like summarize that better than I did, but.
That highlighted part of the latter half of that sentence is really good. I read that and I was like, oh yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I move.
I think I'm good with this.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to skip this one. It's just my brain's a little slow. So I want to come back to this one, Waverly in particular.
I like where this landed. As you know, I was emailing with you earlier saying, what are we thinking? Can this shorten it? And I like Bao's revision to my revision. So I think it reads a lot better.
Okay. We kind of landed in it supporting like it's broad, but it supports the water plan goals. Okay. So we rephrase, for the purposes of this exercise, I'm gonna put this on one page. We spent a lot of time on this one as well, like working on what is it trying to address? And so we spent a lot of time trying to arrive at this statement.
Yeah, I thought this was another one where you guys did a good job on the latter half of the sentence. I remember this as we were all like, yeah, it needs to be affordable for everyone, right? Because usually the first thing that happens in economically depressed neighborhoods is that the landscapes go and it turns to dirt, and like we don't really want that. Like that's not good for anyone. So
I really
exactly what Frank said.
I really like that the latter part of the sentence that Drew is referencing talks about essential use and increased access to landscape benefits community-wide.
It's both of those. That's a good one.
So, and then the last one.
Just one thought. Should it be into instead of in the third word? Incorporate equity into, or maybe further equity in the development?
Yeah, I think into is right.
Okay. And then is it water conservation policies, regulations, rate structures, fees, and programs?
Yes, across multiple communities.
Oops.
I like it. Okay, thanks.
And then the last one was, and Amy kind of came back on right after we had edited this and gave her thumbs up. So Greg, we'd love yours as well. In capturing the intent for this was one, they didn't like the title, so the title got changed to try to contrast with the other partnerships with business and landscape professionals. And so this one was much more statewide collaboration with a specific intent. And so yes, it is echoing what is in the drought management task force, but focused on, they wanted to make sure that it was about what the focus of this group was, which was, well, what are the benefits of reducing water use? And so it was mainly rearranging the sentence, but
this
ended
is
up
when
in
you
a
used to talk about drought, right? Yeah. Another plural of policies, perhaps.
I think I like this. I like the title a whole lot more than drought.
Yeah.
I personally still struggle, even though I'm 100% behind this concept. I personally still struggle that we're calling out one use of conserved water, and there are so many other uses of conserved water. That's my struggle. And I don't know why this one necessarily gets higher priority than us using it for growing populations. And
What about,
It's a-
Greg, what about the focus solely on municipal water portfolios too? Why not ag?
right, all the
Yeah,
this
and I
is
think
urban landscape
think
task force.
to reflect
Yeah.
what the group talked about was one, that was the bigger picture was the responsibility of the drought task force. That was their mission. And the discussion this morning focused on, how do we make a recommendation about saved water that's within the context of the scope of the task force that was looking at landscapes only?
Yeah.
So I think that was the context that they were thinking to add that conserved water. And I don't know that the solutions were narrowly defined, because within our water challenges are meeting population demand.
Yeah. I was just going to say that, Marjo, I think that, right, Greg, you could consider growing population on the Front Range a statewide water challenge.
For sure.
If you wanted, one could read that if one
Yeah.
so chose.
Is
Yeah,
that
I
not
just I think, always having to put on the cynical hat first, water provider hat. I just worry, like, if somebody reads this and said, like, show me where you're using your conserved water for operational flexibility. And I don't know, like,
Yeah.
if Drew, I like your reading of that. I'm just bringing it up and maybe asking the rest of the group, like, how do you read that? Does it feel like it's putting that saved water in a box, or is there still a lot of flexibility in terms of, like, when we save water, how we're applying that?
So my read of this from who drafted it, and I think how many people will take it, is that this is about Front Range urban conservation getting left on the western slope to prevent a compact call.
That, yes, and providing flows when temperatures get high and
Endangered
flows get
fish,
low.
trout, yeah,
Yes.
et cetera.
Yep.
Sure. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's probably the intent here.
Yeah, we talked about concepts around, so from Northern Torrey, Colorado River District, kind of mentioned some of the ongoing dialogues around shared sacrifice and multiple benefits and flexibility, and that there are current barriers, either financial, legal, relationships that, relationships are strong, but there's other barriers to getting to some of the needs. So that was the context that I think we talked about this morning.
Maybe Greg, your cynical side can get, like, relaxed with the first 3 words, advanced creative solutions, right? I mean, obviously no solution is going to happen if one party is not on board, right? And who knows what these could be. They'll be creative and new and different and things we haven't thought of. So of course, right? Those are worth supporting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's a good point. I think it's yeah, I want to give that a little bit more thought. I think it's just this is a hard one, because I firmly believe in it. I think there's a real question about whether it makes sense in this report, because it still feels pretty far outside of everything else. Everything else is all about, like, how are we implementing these programs and sort of furthering landscape transformation. This one gets to, what are we doing with
what do you
that
do
water?
once you've saved the water?
Right.
Yeah, I see that totally.
But
I kind of struggle with this one myself. Kind of the last part of it, to me, as was brought up, it kind of reads, what are the municipal users going to do to address all of the statewide water challenges and not, I don't think there's enough room to be detailed enough to say, this is how much they could address, and it's a small piece. And I also share the concern that this could be read in a way that municipalities may not support or may not be able to meet the kind of struggling for words there. Meet the goal that this kind of says we can. If any of that makes sense, it sounded like gibberish to myself, and I don't know what it said. So
I'm kind of
No.
wondering if there's room to backtrack on this one a little bit, maybe Marjo and Jenna, because I know that the language that Tori and Amy had workshopped was a little bit more general. And then through the conversation in the last meeting, we added some more specificity. I wonder if we would find more consensus on the more general language.
Well, and
Actually, we didn't change a lot of the language, but we can look at what we had before.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I was just going to make the observation that, we are a task force on, like urban landscape transformation to seek, water conservation and efficiency. And there is still that linkage that I think makes sense. And, I don't have a strong recommendation here between, like, if we're improving urban and, municipal landscapes and thereby saving water, there is still that connection back to, like, natural landscapes and flows and like, to me, it is kind of a thought, like, yes, we're recommending all these things that will transform our municipal landscapes. And do we make any nod back towards also, seeing the linkage with, the natural landscapes where the water is originating that is coming towards the urban landscapes. And then, there is that connection there. I'm trying to figure out what we want to say about it, I guess.
Yeah, Waverly, I think I was headed in a similar direction in my head. We absolutely should promote these conservation programs in removing non-functional turf because it can help those natural systems and leaving more water in the river. I think what Tim said is right, that like that last sentence to me feels like it's more municipalities also need to dedicate that water. Like I like making the connection without sort of like 100% committing us to doing, making that choice.
Check the chat.
Yeah.
And Amy and Tori's most recent version of this. That one looks to me less directive of what happens to the saved water. Yeah, Kat, I see you shaking your head. Yeah, on that one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Still talks about partnerships and ongoing, like, hey, yeah, we should do these kinds of things.
I really like their language a lot.
Are we all right if we strike? I'm fine to go back. We can just say it was, you guys wouldn't support it unless it stayed in its original form. But I would recommend keeping the same title.
Yeah, I
support.
like the title.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just the description underneath it.
Yeah, I think a lot of that added specificity kind of came in by way to try to explain this recommendation more to some folks who didn't really understand where it had come from. And so I'm glad you're weighing in on this, Greg.
And the language that Jenna had posted, I like in there that it talks about water conservation in the bigger sense, and even though municipal is kind of put in there, it's put in there in a different context. Water conservation.
Yeah, the purpose is to maximize water portfolios and operational flexibility, not that the purpose is to take the conserved water and put it to statewide benefit.
Yeah, I think that's the key. It's like we're taking the challenge for sure of conserving. Just want to keep some flexibility about how we use it. Kat, or Jenna, when did that new language come in? Was that this morning?
Yeah, it was this morning. I think it was after you jumped off, Greg. And Amy was off too. So it was kind of, and Tori wasn't there either. So we didn't have any of you guys to kind of weigh in and explain your perspectives a little bit more. And I think that there was just some question about how general the recommendation appeared, and trying to understand, if it was more related to demand management, which I don't think is really exactly what we were talking about originally. So I think going back towards this more general language makes a lot of sense to me too.
Yeah, as long as you think Amy and Tori will support it.
Yeah, I mean, this was Amy and Tori's language, the original one. So I think that we're in a good place.
That's awesome.
What do you think, Jenna? Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so, especially because Amy and Tori were not there during that conversation. Amy did come back on the end and said she was fine with the changes. But I definitely know they're on board for the first one because they wrote
it. Okay.
Great.
Here we go then.
Okay.
So that's it.
You're done?
Yeah, just one other thing I wanted to address, and just so you know, when you see the document, we started the morning one. If you didn't fill out this poll on the, any prioritized order of the recommendations, please do by the end of the day. We started the morning this morning talking about formatting and layout. And so you might see reflected in the draft that goes to the governor on Thursday, the 15th. In the summary, executive summary at the beginning of the document, where these recommendations are, there was a desire to keep all of the recommendations on a single page, but to note that we do not know everything, and there's additional research and analysis that needs to be done that support the effective implementation of these ideas. And so we're not sure exactly what it's going to look like, but it will likely be like the research and analysis ideas headings might be in a sidebar on the recommendations page. And then in the document as a whole, it will be reflected with more detail on how they're connected. So there's some just layout changes. It's not substantive in terms of content, but trying to make a connection between some of these ideas and the need to make investments in further learning. I don't know if I reflected that well, but hopefully there's a general understanding of what you're going to see. And then were there other formatting? I feel like there was one more formatting thing we'd addressed, but might be just blurring together.
At the bottom where the recommendations are, because as of now they're duplicated. So at the beginning, because there was a desire to connect the research component to the recommendations, we're working to make it all fit on one page, because that seems to be the number one priority, is have all the recommendations on one page, and then in some way denote the complementary research that can be advanced through additional funding. And then at the end, when the recommendations are revisited, that won't necessarily be all on one page, and the actual full research recommendations will be listed underneath the ones that are the most relevant. So it won't look identical to the top, but it'll have more information, and we'll reference that page on the top so people can go to it. But it's in an effort to get it all on one page with as much information as possible. It just might not be fully complete up there, but it'll still be referenced and there'll be the connection made.
Yeah. On that sort of combining the additional research and analysis into the sections of the recommendations, you know, my only, I guess, concern or word of caution is that I wouldn't want it to look like those areas for additional research and analysis were the items that we landed on as a task force as the way to implement those recommendations. And so, you know, I think it makes sense to have it as like a sidebar in the summary section, or, you know, maybe not even raise it there. Like we want these key recommendations to have the highest priority order, you know, and the areas for additional research analysis were kind of things we picked up along the way, but I don't know that they have that same weight, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that was discussed, that these were just some examples of ideas on way to move it forward, but not necessarily everything. Yeah.
I'll also add that, you know, we spent as a task force a lot more time digging into the recommendations and not really on the additional research and analysis section. So it's, as a task force as a whole, I think we are much more aligned on, exactly as Waverly said, prioritizing the recommendations as to things that people should take away, period. And also there's this other stuff too.
Yeah. And it might come as no surprise that the researcher was most interested in making sure that research got highlighted.
You tell Austin to go peace out.
Yeah,
there wasn't necessarily disagreement, but that was I didn't share that, but that was communicated this morning as well, which is why they were on a sidebar.
Okay.
And we'll work on the design to make sure, like you said, Drew, the recommendations are forefront of what people are looking at. And, you know, if one of the research is to look at the amount of turf with GIS analysis, making sure that isn't, well, in order to adopt turf policy, you have to do this. It's more complementary so that we can learn more and advance that understanding. So we'll work on the design and see what can fit, but making sure that the recommendations are what is really highlighted there, because there is that alignment and agreement with the task force.
Great.
Sounds like you guys have the intent clear. Godspeed.
Yeah, I sure am glad I'm in the second group, just to review the hard work that was done in the first group this morning.
This was a little easier for sure.
Great. Do you need us for anything else?
No, I'll just let Jenna sort of tell you the next steps.
Yeah, I know Marjo just references that the Survey Monkey that went out with the order of the recommendations, they have 11 responses so far. So please fill that out if you have not. We're working tomorrow because you have until the end of the day to continue to comment on the PDF report. So we're working tomorrow to incorporate all of that. And then Wednesday, our copy editor at CWCB is going to be going through the report. We're going to put all that into the new edition on Thursday and then submitting it on Friday to the governor's office, and then also sending you the finalized version of the report before their review. We do ask that you don't share it still broadly. Just keep it, I think that's probably known, but would like to say it anyway. Just keep it internal until we get that review process finished with. So it's not out there, because that definitely steps on the toes of the intent of the review process. So, but that is the timeline for the rest of the week. And if anyone has any questions about that now or later, feel free to reach out and ask.
And what do you want to also mention the January gathering?
Yeah. So as of now, and we're working through what this will look like, but we had another meeting on the calendar, which I don't have in front of me now. I think it was the 8th. Yeah, January 8th. So we're obviously not going to meet again, because that will, or as far as working on the report, but we were thinking of finding a way that we can all get together to sort of celebrate the conclusion of this and just hang out rather than going through and wordsmithing and looking at everything. So we will be in touch with what that can look like and see that the date might shift, but if there's interest, first of all, and then figuring out what we can do on our end to just have a little celebratory gathering that really just puts a bow and a finish at the end of all this work that everybody's doing.
I'm gonna throw my vote in for the botanical gardens because I think that's very symbolic.
Yeah, Frank said that there's an open invite that would be no cost for the facility to have Denver Botanical Gardens. So we will be in touch when we get through the report. That's priority number one, and then we will figure out something for January after that. That will probably not be prioritized this week, but we'll be in touch soon.
My vote is for the huge unused piece of grass in the tech center. Just go get drink wine coolers out there or something.
Be careful,
It
Greg.
could
Might
become a
turn
press
it from
release.
might turn it from non-functional to functional turf if we have a party out there.
You have to,
Good point.
it would require everybody doing it as a protest and having little band signs.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
I can see that now. There's some legislation they have to remove it. They have a picture of our task force out there using it. That's their argument for it's functional. Look,
You used it.
You used it.
Okay, I take that back.
You guys joke and you're silly, but I have heard of that kind of thing happening in Las Vegas where, they did this non-functional thing and HOAs were like, no, I like my grass. We're going to host a party there. And now I'm going to call it functional instead. So I don't have to take it out.
There was a piece. So I think some of you know this. I'm originally from Nevada. So I kind of keep up on that. There was a property that put in a bench.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Yes,
Yeah.
Tim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So funny.
A bench. Now it's
And they're like, oh, look, it's functional.
Yeah. Waverly.
So I'll just note that I think I declined that meeting on the 8th because I realized we weren't going to be using it. So you might just send anything new afresh to everyone, and maybe a new hold to keep it on people's calendars.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I will, especially
We'll re-invite you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to come.
Now that it's a party, she wants to go. Originally, she
Yeah.
declined.
So I'm done with you.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you all for working through, sometimes getting to consensus the way that we have done that can be quite tedious because it is agreement on intent and wording. And I just want to thank all of you for your commitment to it and sort of supporting the process, and great job.
Well, kudos to you, Marjo and Kat and Jenna and the whole team. We've really made it through like a lot of challenging conversations and, ended up with a task force list of recommendations that, like you said, we've gotten consensus on. So that's not a small feat. So congratulations and thank you.